My traditional education was completely different than what is taught in schools today. Instead of contemporary educational systems in classrooms and schools, my education happened out on the land. I was taught to respect the land and the animals living off of it as Indigenous peoples have since time immemorial. We worked with local resources, so if something broke, we could repair it on location, such as the birch bark canoe, which we invented. My education revolved around principles of egalitarianism, principles of sustainability, although we didn't call it that, forward thinking, respect, and more. The land doesn't have a voice, so we are the voice for the land. One Indigenous concept that the Okanagan people used for hundreds of years when foraging was related to the sustainable uses of that resource. When foraging berries, you could only pick a berry off of a plant if it was the 11th one. So you would count 10 berries and you could take the 11th one as a method of sustainability. This ensured there would be berries for everyone to come and the resources would never be depleted. We farmed beans, squash, and corn for hundreds of years. We looked out for each other in our communities. We shared and respected our food, gave thanks, and worked as a community, and we flourished. This was my education, experiential education on how to survive independently and as a community. My education was how to hunt, how to forage, how to live off the land, how to respect, and how a small community can work as one.
The first European-run missionary school opened in Quebec and operated from 1620 to 1629. This marked the beginning of the industrial school system that would emerge within Canada in the mid-1800s. In 1832, the Mohawk Indian Residential School first opened its doors in Brantford, Ontario. It was the first and longest-running operated school, closing in 1969. 1850s and 60s. Assimilation of Aboriginal people through education becomes official policy. 1876. The Indian Act comes into effect, where subsequent amendments call for compulsory attendance of Aboriginal children to residential schools. 1889. First allegations of physical and sexual abuse emerged from the Rupert's Land School in Selkirk, Manitoba. In the 1950s, the Canadian government realizes that the residential school system failed to reach its goals. The policy then shifted to integration, not assimilation, and schools began shifting slowly to day schools. 1996. The last federally run Indian residential school closes in Punakee, Saskatchewan. And finally, in 2008, Prime Minister Stephen Harper issues an official apology on behalf of the Canadian government for all its wrongs that were committed in the schools. That the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is also launched in this year.
When I first arrived at the school, I noticed that all the kids were wearing the same clothes, and they did not look happy. I did not have any friends and felt lonely. It was hard to get to know the other kids because the priests and nuns would not allow us to speak our own language, and yet did not adequately teach us their language so that we could communicate. We could not ask for anything because we were not able to speak their language, and if we used our own, we would be severely punished. We found ways to speak secretly amongst each other, being sure not to get caught. We lived with this kind of fear every day. Our own culture was outlawed. The goal of the priests and nuns was to take away our culture entirely. We often heard them say things like, "We are here to take the Indian out of you." They wanted us to become children of God and force their religion on us, calling us heathens, savages. We had no interest in learning about their religion, but they made us write about God all the time. We were always hungry because there was never enough food. We ate mush every morning, cold potatoes every lunch. When we got older, we were sent to public school. The residential schools did not prepare us well for what we were about to learn because they did not teach us subjects that were taught in public school, like math and English. This made it very difficult, and I did not finish school. When I finally returned home, I hardly recognized my family. I found it difficult to communicate and felt like an outcast in my own community.